Hello, everyone. I'm Sean. I'm the founder of Earth Buddy, and today I'm here with my awesome friend and colleague in the world of helping pets, Dr. Casara Andre, who's right now covering Front Range Veterinary. Oh, you're going to have to help me on the name of that. I just totally blanked.
Yeah, there's so many acronyms.
Yes, exactly.
Yes. So Sean, you and I know each other from a lot of different intersections. So today I'll be talking specifically from the perspective of the Front Range Veterinary Medical Reserve Corps, or the VMRC. So that's the licensed veterinarians and technicians that respond to animal-related disasters.
Which is very relative to what we're going to be talking about today in terms of pet stress management and resiliency.
Yes,
and I think that is like such an awesome topic to kind of lean into when it comes to this, because daily stress and stress that they deal with on a regular basis, but those are like the most stressful. And as far as I know, you were part of writing a paper post the Marshall fires that we had here in Colorado. Can you tell us a little bit about that before we kind of get into the stress management and resiliency stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. Which I think it just flows in well there. So our team was involved in the Marshall Fire recovery, essentially recovery from the incident that happened in Boulder County, 2021. It was a pretty devastating wildfire. It's being called an urban firestorm. It was a really big fire that happened in a very urban, very well-developed area. And so that in and of itself means that people were less prepared, and there were a lot of houses destroyed, and unfortunately there were a lot of animals that lost their lives as well. So while our team was dealing with helping and support the community and pet loss, grief, support, all of that, there was also, even for the families that didn't lose a pet, they maybe lost their house, or they for sure lost their life schedule, just like the things that happen after a disaster, or even for the families that didn't lose their dwelling, but just evacuated, just to go sit in an evacuation shelter and be worried about your home. That's pretty stressful. So for sure, the animals involved in our spaces feel those stressors themselves, but particularly in disaster work, we think about the impact of the human stressor on the animal that's adjacent to them, because many times we're the ones trying to help our pet and comfort and bi-directionally get comfort. And when the world is just topsy-turvy, neither species is doing a good job of regulating or settling in. So sorry, you asked me about the paper. Yeah, I'll speak to that. Yeah. We did write a paper through the Natural Hazard Center in Boulder. We also have a peer review paper as well. And those really focused on the grief of losing a pet, the grief of being in a disaster, and the toll that takes on family units. But those papers also looked at the cost to the veterinary community in not being able to be as effective in helping, not necessarily having done a good enough job of prepping families for evacuation, for disaster. So I do think that those tie in really well here. Our current work with the disaster team is to really help families be prepared for evacuation or disaster, so that even if they have to go through that traumatic event, hopefully everyone comes out well and healthy on the other side.
I hear all the time when I mention this kind of goal and process to like get people more prepared for these kind of natural disasters or emergencies. Mm-hmm. And people seem to be very like, they have it covered. It's okay. I got it covered. I know what to do.
I'm good.
But you saw even in that fire and other things, there's so many moving parts. Yeah. And you did the role play last weekend or a couple of weekends ago. And I immediately took away from that being at it was that there's a lot to consider and a lot to kind of factor in terms of being prepared. Do you have any idea or like thoughts on like how to be more prepared for that stuff? Not necessarily like worrying about the end of the world, but like being somewhat prepared for you and your pets.
Absolutely. What's fortunate is, as big and scary as those incidences are, and as hard as it is for us to think about all the things that need to be done to be prepared, once you start making progress in being prepared, your anxiety levels go down, and it just becomes easier to take a little bit at a time, a little bit at a time. And I love your comments from the human perspective that if you tell a human, you should be prepared. I'm like, it's fine. I got it. I'll make do.
Yep.
But when we change that conversation to focus on the animal and make the conversation start from the perspective of the animal, perhaps we say, in order for your animal to avoid emotional trauma from an evacuation, you should be prepared. In order for your animal to go through this hard situation, even if you don't lose your house, even if you're just evacuated for a night, in order for your animal not to have long-term physical health and behavioral health consequences, we need to prepare in advance. And what's beautiful about the hearts that love animals is that for sure gets action. That is the thing that we found, that even if the human's like, we're good, I'm going to be fine. And we just bring up the point of, well, you might be fine, but your animal is going to be pretty stressed. So let's work on that together. It just changes the conversation because that's who we care about. We're all here for the animals.
It's so funny. I think about those situations like in the heat of the moment. And a lot of people will be like, oh, my pet's fine. They'll be able to handle all that. Because they're so stoic, I think sometimes we give them a lot more like, hey, they'll be fine. They'll just kind of go with the flow and they're just able to hang out. Well, one, they don't speak English, and two, they don't really show emotions the same way. Now, if you are very in tune with your pet, you'll see like the severity of certain things, but not many people are paying attention in those kind of situations. So I think we overestimate their ability to handle these things sometimes. And I think that's really important. Casara, we've known each other forever, so I forget sometimes. Can you give us a little bit of a background in terms of where you came from, like, and how you started kind of going down this road of massage therapy, cannabis, and some of the other stuff that you're working on? Because I think it's really important to note, because there's so much confusion and there's so many people saying these things, that things, and the other. And we've been doing this for so long that I think it's I think it's important to call out those specific attributes that you've kind of been in the trenches for and actually doing the work.
Yeah, I'd love to chat about that, because it has, well, one, it's been fun to know you for so many years and to work on so many amazing projects together. But I have also loved those intersections because I so recognize yours and Earth Buddy's heart for truly supporting the holistic well-being of the patient. And from a veterinarian's perspective, the safety of the product you're using and the cleanliness of the product you're using is just as important as any active molecules that are in there, especially when we're dealing with small body weights and other concurrent diseases, etc. So yes, I'd be happy to give a little bit of background. I am a practicing veterinarian in Colorado at the moment, but I am also interested in behavioral health, emotional disease, emotional trauma in animals at a much broader scale. So while I do practice and see animals here in Colorado, several of my businesses work nationally as well as globally to really join with colleagues at a global world scale to figure out what are we doing to support animals as our human world continues to become really chaotic. In my early career, I was a veterinarian for the military. So I served as a veterinarian, an officer in the U.S. Army Veterinary Corps. And that was my really first intersection with the feeling that I was missing something in my medicine. When you're working with working dogs, they are amazing athletes. And most of them we know from birth, if not birth, like 2 years old, through all of their working lifetime. So you're not really surprised by cardiac disease or renal disease. Like, you have really good medical history on these animals. But yet I noticed that I was missing something. I was either working with my animals that had impaled themselves on in a training accident, like it was this big dramatic thing, or we just needed something to recuperate from a hard day of training. You just kind of see those big bookends. And I felt that my medicine when I was in the military really only focused on the severe, I needed a steroid or a non-steroidal or an antibiotic. And I found that that was just missing a really important part of care that the working animal needed, something to really help the body recuperate and rebalance. So after finishing with the military, I taught ROTC for a while here in Colorado, which is why I ended up here. and then have been growing some practices of my own. So one of them is a massage school. Touch in animals is such a beautiful way to communicate, to cross that species boundary of communication when they don't speak human, as you said so eloquently. But we still have that communication style as mammals. We share touch as a communication avenue. And so massage from an anxiety reduction standpoint, from a body health, regulating that entire nervous system and somatic side is really important. And then definitely because we're in Colorado, I've been working with cannabis for the past 6-7 years now, definitely from a harm reduction perspective, but also actively thinking about and working on cases that really need their endocannabinoid system balanced. And what's amazing about that work is the ECS, endocannabinoid system, is such a new system for medicine and science to be exploring, but yet it holds so much potential for what we're talking about today, for really regulating stress and anxiety, because it's really putting that animal's body back into a state of balance, regardless of which system was out of balance to begin with. So that's really where I'm focused now. I love to work with a lot of different modalities, from massage to acupuncture to cannabis to family unit counseling. Sometimes it's about the human. So I'm excited to chat with you from any angle, but really excited to chat about cannabis and how that supports the ECS.
Well, thank you. Thank you for doing that. I think that's very important, because the work you've done, in my opinion, has been on the forefront, and it's really understanding a very overall way to look at, cannabis therapy, and also incorporating that with other tools like massage therapy. And you really helped me learn it about my own dog specifically, which is the easiest way, because they're our best teachers, as we know.
Absolutely.
But I think it really helps me, especially, I own a brand, I have product, I want to talk about it, but I think having these other tools and these other resources in place. And one thing you also taught me is that having a good team. Yes. You might have your general practitioner as a human. You should have the same thing for your pet, but then you should have these other modalities and other vets that might specialize in something. Yeah. And I don't think we often look at it that way, because it sounds expensive, but it really isn't, because you're not going to your general practitioner every day, or to fix the little thing, or the rehab, or, the stress issue. So to me, I think you've taught me a lot in that regard, and looking at the true sense of what holistic is meaning the whole, or, everything is connected, as opposed to just using it as a marketing term. So I love it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Sean, I'll just add a note to what you said there. I think the paradigm of holistic includes lots of modalities, integrated modalities, that they all work together, whether that be Western medicine, Eastern tradition, doesn't matter, but holistically looking at that animal. In addition, holistic ideas include ranges of time. So rather than just looking at that moment in time where we see the animal in an exam room and can think holistically about that issue, holistically also means for this animal's life stage and for the stages that are coming. How do we, what we're talking about today, prep the animal for the season of time that we as a human know is going to be stressful? We know that summer is coming. From the disaster response side, we know there's going to be evacuations. We live in a wildfire state. It's going to happen. Fireworks are going to be around. So I think the idea of holistic medicine in a timeline is not always something we speak about, but is really important, because that is what allows it to be not as expensive. So even while it can feel like a lot of pieces at play, by tackling them in a small, each as we need to, and prepping and preventing, that's how you avoid the big surgeries or the big intensive care units, or I have to spend a week in the hospital. It's by really prepping for those stressors as they come.
Yep. I've dealt with pretty much the majority of those, except for the disaster part, knock wood. But yeah, it's so funny. It's like it's like we've talked before, and you led me right into the topic. But
we've just known each other for forever. So
I know, but it's literally why I changed our talk about it's not just pet stress management, but what I take away is that's stress resiliency.
Yes.
And that's part of the management. Resiliency allows us to adapt. We can't change the stress that is coming in from the environment. I mean, we can help with diet and things like that, make little changes, but a lot of the stressors, especially, from the pet standpoint, often are external and not much we can do around that. So I'm so happy that we're kind of talking about this. So I just want to like frame it as a pet owner. Every year we see the biggest rush to pet stores and to our products and calming in general. And there's really good data that we have on this for calming products. I know vets are promoting more sedative and like SSRI type drugs. And that's, I get it. If there's a situation where the pet might harm themselves, I get the use of that. But most people are going to lean towards something that is going to relax them. I think before we go into product and using stuff, I think, where do you kind of start with assessing? Because I like, other vets have told me, test, don't guess. And I like to say, before we even go to testing, let's assess our own pet. So how do you like to assess pets before you go, let's do blood work and let's do all this, and it's overwhelming for them.
Yeah. Well, let me mention for, I think, a context point that all your audience will appreciate and definitely features really strongly in our disaster response work. A nervous animal, a stressed animal, is not the one that you want to restrain for a blood draw. That's just not, that animal does not want that procedure to happen at that point in time. So thinking just about that, I think your point about assessing first, figuring out if we need to assess further with diagnostics or closer monitoring, etc., is lovely. It allows us to really, and what we're going to talk about here, allow the body system to just regulate. Because, as you also mentioned, unfortunately, as pet owners, we can't prevent our pets from, we can't keep them safe. It is a world that we don't know what's going to happen. There are so many chaotic stressors happening in our lives. There are things that are going to be stressful for our animals, stressful, harmful. We cannot always keep them safe, but we can create resilience. And that, importantly, is the difference between the pharmaceutical side of using pharmaceuticals like in a stressful situation and cannabis or other modalities that fall more into the adaptogen category. We're trying to create a body system and an external environment that allows that animal to learn through the hard moment so that they come out better on the other side. And I think that that's a really important paradigm shift for pet parents to think about and talk to their veterinary practitioners about and really talk as a family unit about. Because if we're so stressed that our animals, oh, he's so nervous and he's going through a tough time, we're not helping the situation. Whereas if we can take that situation and create opportunities for success that we help the animal de-escalate, re-regulate, co-regulate with us, then actually we all come out of that stressful situation better. The bond is improved, the animal's more resilient, etc. So that kind of goes back to that timeline and thinking about that larger perspective. So I think it's really interesting to think about that resiliency part and making sure that that's really at our focus. And then I do want to mention that a lot of the need here is to focus on the family unit. What is the health that's happening within that entire unit? Because many times if us as the humans are okay, our animals are probably okay as well. So there's so much that we can do by regulating ourselves to make that scenario easier for the animal. And then when we need extra help on top of that, leaning first on adaptogens, settling, de-stressing techniques, I think that just creates a moment for us to truly see what's going on in the animal's body before deciding, yes, I really need to know what your lab work is. And there's so much space in that pre-time that I think we can capitalize on a lot more.
I think when it's so funny, we were talking earlier before we started about kind of addressing, the pet parent's current state. And one thing I do that I've been really pushing to everybody is I ask myself a couple questions if I'm feeling overwhelmed or stressed out. And this can relate to pet parents is I ask myself, have I drank water lately? Have I eaten anything? And did I exercise recently? And if I can't answer two of the three, I could probably do those and significantly reduce my own stress.
Yeah.
I think those are so simple, And you can add a few other things in there, but I think it's like, did I drink water? Am I over caffeinated? You know, those kind of things. I think just assessing yourself is like a first step too. And especially, so like a lot of times I think it's important to note, like pet parents will come to us and go, I have this acute or specific situation. Other than that, they're totally fine. I know that's not really the case, because I think a lot of times their RPMs just naturally run higher. But how do you look at that? Or how do you communicate with pet parents that kind of think it's this one situation, and other than that, they're like Zen Buddha?
Yeah, I love the question, and I love the analogy. I think we actually go back to the previous question that you asked or you stated, and talk about assessment. What can we actually glean from observation that maybe we're just not picking up on? So two pieces that I like to chat about for that is, one, the actual signs of behavior, the signs of anxiety or the behaviors related to anxiety in an animal. And sometimes just knowing those suddenly opens up the idea that maybe the pet is struggling in some other areas. And then two, journaling. And so I'll start with journaling first and work backwards. Journaling is the way that we catch those little subtle signs that are growing on each other. It's the way that we identify triggers that may be stacking up over time. And then suddenly there's an explosion and the family is just confused. Why did this happen? The animal was fine. There wasn't an issue. And then this. But if we're more careful in observation, and particularly with journaling, because as humans, it's hard for us to find those subtle trends. We might be able to identify the fact that the animal was actually getting a little bit more stressed every single day. And that led to the panic attack or the aggressive act or something like that. And particularly in seasons where here in Colorado, there's a spring storm every day. Then we add on fireworks, then we add on all these other things. Those are triggers and anxieties that are stacking. And if we can be aware of those, even if there's a fireworks night, if we have kept that pet de-escalated or take some time to remove some of the triggers from the days beforehand, we might do a much better job of helping them maintain calm in that active, stressful situation. So journaling is important from all observation, and particularly if you're using cannabis. And then I'll also explain some of the behaviors around anxiety. Did you have a comment on the journaling?
Just real quick, because I think sometimes when people hear journaling, they think they're writing like a pet diary. Just give because you kind of opened me up, because when I heard journaling first, and I heard you talk about it a lot of times to other people, I think that can sometimes sound like you have to write like your diary, like today we went and did this. You kind of give some ideas of like what journaling looks like, because it's a lot more simpler than people think.
Yeah. Well, Sean, don't you have a journal? I feel like I've seen a link to that. So I definitely like that one. I remember, I can see it in my mind. The idea about journaling is that it is very unique to the family unit and unique to the pet. And this can literally be a notebook sheet torn out and put a magnet on the fridge, and one column where you note, yes or no, my pet was anxious today. It could be as simple as that. Or it could be as complicated as maybe 4 times a day, just having a time of day. One of my favorites is to use a number scale and just have the pet parent write down a 1 through 10. So at these time points, just look at your pet and write down a number that you feel grades where they are emotionally. And so for me, that information is so important. And it gives me so much information about what's going on, because then I can actually see trends over days. And we find, particularly in emotional health work, behavioral health work, that it really is trends that are more than 24 hours, trends that are more than 48 hours, trends that are more like 72 hours or a week. And, both you and I believe strongly in the importance of nutrition and how that contributes to resiliency. And I find that when we have conversations about nutrition, sometimes pet parents really need an immediate fix. And that's really not how nutrition works. We're talking about state in the body, how that body has been over the past month, how it's going to be in the future month. So journaling can be super simple, But usually when I say it really helps me be able to give better guidance, that sometimes is the way that we make that easier. It really informs the guidance that I can give when I can see a trend over multiple days.
Can I give I'll give a personal example, because I think these are things that, like, again, I am a founder of a company that makes calming stuff. And I think it's really important to note that, like, when you actually kind of incorporate your holistic and veterinary and all these different things, you have a much better example. And the example I think of when you were talking, it was like, when I started tracking, what I found is when I can bring you info that I've dated and brought to the vet, and I have like documented stuff, it triggers questions that you wouldn't have known to ask otherwise. So I think it's really important, and it's so simple. And all I did was just literally date and just go, a seizure or whatever the issue was with my dog Iggy. Just doing that allows you to ask more poignant questions that are going to really like figure things out, or get us to another level of like, how do we handle this or manage it?
Yeah. And importantly, I'll capture that management word that you use at the end. Sometimes we just need a management solution. Sometimes we're not in a circumstance where we can work on it, or the pet family just does not have the time. A kid's leaving for college, or someone's changing. Sometimes we just don't have the time to work on that now. But we also can identify the triggers, and we can identify points in the day where if we just put a little bit of management, pull that pet out of the situation, give a little bit of cannabis, do a little bit of massage, we can help ameliorate that and at least hold space until we can work on it in a more significant way. And I think particularly for spring and summer and anxiety and noise phobia and thunderstorm phobias, many times we do need a management option, because desensitizing to sounds is hard. Desensitizing to thunderstorms is hard. So it's often a mix of the two, with the intention to work on it in the long term.
So I think about the situations that are coming up, but like there's a bunch of typical ones, car rides and the
nail trims, blood draws.
Yeah, the separation. Those are like a triple whammy, because they have to drive to go get that done. They might hate it. They only get in the car when they go to the vet. That was a dog I had a long time ago. He's like, he knows. He's like, I'm getting in the car. We're going to the vet. I hate this already. Yeah. So there's all that. When you kind of understand these. So now that we've kind of like addressed like assessing these things and documenting them and having this information ready. Now that you know these things, now the day of the thing, or that they're selling fireworks and they've been going off in my neighborhood this week. Yeah. Now that we know this, it's like, okay, where do we go from here? Now that we've assessed and we kind of have a better idea from an observational standpoint, how do you want to address? I mean, I think my takeaway is like, there's some routine, there's some practices you can start implementing a little bit more aggressively, maybe. And that might include a cannabis product or touch therapy, whatever that is. But I mean, how would you look? And this is all stuff I learned from you, so it doesn't matter. But it's like, I think it's not just relying on one thing. It's like, okay, I know all these things, I'm aware, and where do I go from here?
As well as giving yourself as the pet parent a lot of grace, because there are things happening in your life, in just running a business, in your kid's life. So many times we need to plan for resiliency with time, with redundancy in a schedule, just to make sure that when we're not stressed about the time we were home late, but then also that animal knows what's happening and has some context for what they might experience. Sean, before I answer that one, let me backtrack, and I'd like to talk about the signs of behavior, because I think that bleeds into this one of saying, okay, now I know my animal's close to their panic attack. Like I can tell what's actually happening. Okay. So, we most people will know fight or flight as really big categories for the animal or the human is nervous. So fight, like bring it on. I just want out of the situation. I'm willing to put up my dukes or pull up my teeth. I just want out. Or flight, meaning I'm leaving. And when an animal chooses between those two, has a lot to do with their prior exposure, breeding, the situation, etc. But there are also signs of anxiety such as fidget. So many times this one is easily confused because the pet parent will think that the animal's just grooming or self-soothing themselves, or they're just kind of, maybe it's the happy dog who's always like really wagging their tail and kind of can't quite sit still. But fidgeting can be actually a very, very clear sign of anxiety. And that's one that I would bring to everyone's mind really clearly, because that's probably one that you're going to see just on the edges. You know, when that animal starts to be a little bit nervous, they start grooming their paw, or the cat who's kind of bare on the belly. So I think we see that all the time, but by linking it really closely to, there's something in that internal environment that's not okay, or that internal environment is trying to regulate what's going on the outside. I think that one's a really important one to call out. Did you have a comment on that one? Then I can.
It's so funny you say that, because because we're with our pets every day, we overlook those things, and it's like, oh, they're just doing that. Maybe they're licking to soothe, or maybe they're trying to avoid the big thing. So it's so funny you say that. And every pet has their own, just like us, you know, we twiddle our thumbs.
You know, the little like tweaks that you do.
Touch our face or something. You know, like I have them and I don't even realize. We do them subconsciously, and I'm sure the pets do as well.
Yeah, for sure. So fight, flight, fidget are really, really common ones. Freeze is a really important one to chat about. This is a little bit less probably what people are going to see with sound phobia or noise phobia. This is a little bit more of a situational response to a pretty acute anxiety. So think about the animal that just is frozen where they are. And this can apply to particularly species outside of cats and dogs. Think about the deer that freezes, or the donkey that freezes and then runs. But the reason I mention this as important is because many times we can see the animal freeze and then suddenly they respond. And we're like, what happened? You were fine. But we need to understand that that anxiety and that fear started at the freeze point. And then it just had this timeline before it switched over into, okay, I'm out of here. And that can be based on the breed, based on the species, based on training, etc. So not assuming that just because the animal's still, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're okay. So having that in our paradigm, I think, can be really, really useful. Comments on that one, and then there's one more.
Is there, no, go ahead. I want to hear that.
Fawn is the last one. And I would put this as probably something that people are going to see in these particularly anxiety situations. Fawn is the animal doing any behavior that elicits a decreased emotional response from, or a more settled emotional response from the humans. So think about the dog who play bows all the time, or the dog who really has that cute little like sidle up to you and look at, you know, they just have some postures that are just like, oh, I'm really cute, and can you please de-escalate, human? Yeah. And so many times you'll see the animals offer this to settle the humans around them. And this is really important to think about, because many times the animal is trying to help, the animal is trying to manage the situation, and we have a bunch of stressed humans. And when the animal does a play bout, what do all the humans do? Oh, you're so cute. And everyone takes a breath, and everyone laughs, and everyone feels better, and the environmental pressure is off. And so what is that to the animal? They're like, dispel that situation. And so it really is this reinforcing the fact that they think they need to manage the emotional context of the humans. And that's a big responsibility for a little puppy, for a cat, for any animal. And so if they're really stressed and the humans are really stressed, this fawning behavior can be subtle, and it can be really easy for us to not be aware of, because we might actually feel better when the animal shows us this behavior. They might actually be successful and help us de-escalate. But what are they feeling like as a result?
Do you think they sometimes take it on for us?
Absolutely. 100%. No question.
Yeah. I think they do. And sometimes we don't even think about it. We just think, oh, this is my problem and I'm bearing this, you know, this tough thing.
Totally.
And our poor pet is probably just sitting there just like, oh, come on.
They're like, I did that for you. Yeah. And, you know, it's important to point out that that's not always negative. A therapy animal that has received training uses this intentionally. They can use all of their behavior and their physiology, keeping their heart rate low, but they've received appropriate, adequate, and continued training on how to do that. And importantly, have that time to de-escalate themselves. So a therapy animal has a very complicated training, maintenance, and then also medical care. And if we are putting that type of service on an animal that's not trained for it and sort of making them inadvertently manage our emotions, that's exhausting. And we know from some of the research post-COVID that many of the animals in the homes that were really stressed during the COVID quarantine, their behavioral health went down and declined. So it is something that we need to be really cognizant of and think about.
Yeah, right. When you're saying that, I thought of my dad's dog. So he has a registered service dog. He's very big on like therapy or service dog. Like you really should have like the paperwork and all that stuff done, because there's a very big difference than just signing something up online. And he's very big on, you know, educating me on that. But when he gets worked up with his service dog, I see Polly, his dog, literally like just like do the butt wiggle over to him, and like lean on him. And even if he's getting worked up and he's not actually like angry, he's just getting worked up. He's like a very charismatic person. I see her just go over there and just, and then it snaps his attention away, and he has to pet her and say, what's up? Absolutely. She like knows. It's unbelievable how instinctive they are to our emotions. Yeah. I think that we kind of write off a lot of theirs is kind of, it's a little bit tough, because it's like we should be more catering to theirs, because they are not perfect emotionally as they are.
So true.
Okay, so I have fight, flight, fidget, freeze, and fawn. I love the F's, the big F's of the stress in their life.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, that would be a great place to measure, don't you think, of just like how to like writing those down and just going like, hey, where are they at with all of those in their stressors? And even if you know it's something stressful, do you think that would be good to kind of just like have that ready and go, how do they react to the thing I know they're going to be stressed about, but like, what are the stages?
Absolutely. Just to identify what your animal's unique presentation of anxiety is. Just like you as a human have your own fidgets and your own triggers and your own things that you like, things that help you de-escalate versus not. Animals are just as unique and just as individualized. So maybe a good exercise before people even start journaling is simply to assess, what is my animal's stress behavior? What do they do when they're trying to communicate to me that they're stressed? Because most animals will, to their bonded human, to their paired human or family, try to communicate, hey, I'm feeling not okay, or you're feeling not okay, just like your example with your dad. So us being able to identify it, one, is beautiful and the first step so that we can actually have that communication. But think how much easier that is for a pet sitter or a boarding facility for you to be able to communicate what your pet might do if they're feeling uncomfortable. Now, in our disaster response work, we think a lot about the animal and the family coming into a shelter and how stressful that is. But we're also thinking about this from a public health perspective, because if we're suddenly crowding all these animals and humans together, and then, you know, inadvertently a child kind of tumbles into a dog that's trying to say, leave me alone, you know, there's just so much potential for some really serious harm, that just being aware of what that animal's trying to say allows us to intervene, put up a little barrier, give them a little bit of peace and quiet. But we have to know what the animal's saying. So I think paying attention to start, journaling then allows us to take the next action steps of how can we help? How can we make this better for everybody?
Such a great tie to the disaster or emergency preparedness side, because you know your pet and you probably know how to handle their different stressors, but in the off chance, you know, somebody has to grab your pet and bring them somewhere and meet you. And turns out they don't really like kids running up to them, which, you know, kids shouldn't just run up to any dog, but like in those situations, it's going to be kind of chaotic. The kid sees the dog, runs up, that could be a recipe for disaster. So I think that's so important in understanding that and having paperwork like that just kind of readily available. Like, hey, doesn't like other dogs, will definitely
give me
fight
space.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, it's really important.
I wish people would do that for me as a human to other humans. I'm like, please read my sign. Please read my signs of me saying that I'm stressed.
Yeah, I mean, they give them to people with service dogs. They're little cards. It's like, I don't have to tell you why I have this dog, but here's what this dog does for me.
Yeah, totally.
I think that's important. We all need to wear like a QR code or something and be like, here, can you download this?
Yes.
Awesome. Well, I think we've done a good job of like assessing. I think there's like a physical, emotional, environmental thing that we can all assess. Now from like addressing it head on, I think people often come to us and go, okay, what product? And it's like, okay, great. I have some ideas. And I always, if I'm talking to them directly, try to give them either like a physical thing that they should consider or an exercise, literally walking them a little bit more, or desensitization training kind of tip. Yeah. I don't try to like say you have to do this with this, but I think having that kind of two-part suggestion helps us a lot.
Absolutely.
Is it, like, how do you go about that when you're like, all right, we kind of know where we're going, but now we have a product and now we have to like, implement this and not just give them a ton of CBD and hope for the best. And it's just going to totally sedate them type of attitude.
Yeah, a great question and a big topic, but one that I think is really important to think about holistically, as we've already used that phrase, when we're trying to tackle something as big as thunderstorm phobia or firework phobia, because there's so much involved in that. And it's such a prolonged, stressful time that it really needs a lot of angles to support it. And one is not gonna carry the day. So let me just say first that from the pharmaceutical side, we think about those molecules as making the body do something. So if I give an anxiolytic, if I give a sedative, SSRI, any of those, the paradigm and where that works in the synapse, if we're talking about something in the brain, it's going to work from the perspective of modulating the signal coming through. So making that animal sedate enough that they're not going to care about the loud noise. But that's really hard to do well and not get them so close to that sedation point that they're actually sedated. And what we need to be cognizant of in behavioral health is that the animal who's stressed can still be stressed when they're sedated. They just can't move.
Yeah.
And that can be a really stressful scenario in and of itself. So sometimes we need to respect the fact that being angry and being upset and being afraid is not actually that bad. Remember what we talked about in the beginning? We're trying to create resiliency. We're trying to create a situation where that pet can grow through that moment. It's just like having a toddler. It's like, it's okay for you to have a temper tantrum right now, but we also need to get through it and figure out, what we need to do in the bigger context. So while sedatives absolutely have a role, it is usually not effective to be our only modality of therapy. It's not going to make next summer easier. Yeah. It's not going to make the next car ride easier. And in fact, many of our really clever, really body aware dogs, all animals, but I'll speak about dogs specifically, they start to panic when they feel the meds come on board. Does that make sense? So there's a sensation of taking trazodone. There's a sensation of taking gabapentin. And so if that always ends up with a sedated, dysphoric car ride that still ends up at the vet, the anxiety is going to start as soon as they get the med. And that's obviously very counterproductive. So that's really that pharmaceutical side, while really, really important, and particularly important if we're trying to go recuperate from a hit by car or fall down the stairs, and we really need that pharmaceutical control. But if we're trying to make progress in the long term and support, again, the behavioral health of the entire family, thinking about learning through that moment is really where I think our focus needs to be. And that's why looking at the endocannabinoid system gives us an opportunity to really do that. The ECS, endocannabinoid system, is the system in the body that maintains balance. It is responsible for homeostasis in the animal's environment. And so that inherently that means that it is involved in learning, in memory, in processing situations, in figuring out what am I going to do next. It's just this really, really beautiful system in the body that we see work at particular areas of the synapse and the brain and in the periphery. So the ECS just gives us an amazing target to really focus on. And what's fascinating is that really everything affects it, because it is this balancing system in the body. Things like massage can work on the ECS. Nutrition works on the ECS. Cannabis is fortunately just this really effective, clinically safe way that we can kind of shortcut to work at the ECS directly. So when I think about counseling a family, working through some behavioral issues, some anxiety, nutrition definitely needs to be a piece of it. Communication, whether that's through training or therapeutic touch, that has to be involved. But then we also want kind of that shortcut. We want something that can help that animal balance themselves in a stressful situation. And rather than using a pharmaceutical that would just sedate them, if we can use a modality that actually helps that ECS be robust, that actually helps that ECS have good tone, is the term that we use on it from a medical context. That's how we help the animal become resilient. And now we still need to do some co-regulation and help them through the scenario. But it means that we have all those body systems ready to learn how to get through that moment successfully. And when we're thinking about a thunderstorm that's several hours, or evacuation that might last overnight or a couple of days, it's really hard to sedate a pet for multiple hours on end. That's not good for their body health. That's not good for their hydration status. But if instead we can use something that helps them manage themselves and learn through the moment, that's a much safer and we found much more effective way to address some of these behavioral concerns.
It's the situation that comes to mind is like, oftentimes in Colorado here, the storm comes over the mountains and you're like, is it going to come our way? Is it not? But our pets often like sense it way quicker than us. And then the other side is like, fireworks are completely unpredictable. You know your neighborhood. I have the one neighbor that lights them off really early, all year round, basically. And so, not being able to predict that, it's really hard to then just go, hey, here's a bunch of this and hopefully it works. Or they're already on level 5,000 and they're freaking out. It's like, I think creating those tools. And one of the things that I really like to encourage, I don't like to use the word build up in their system, but I think it's like, to your point, training their ECS or their endocannabinoid system to modulate or regulate those responses a little bit more in a healthy way, as opposed to just firing off, I'm freaked out, I need to act out and show mom and dad that this sucks.
Absolutely.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. How much better if you already have those communication tools established so that your animal can say, I'm worried, this is scary, I need some help. And then you have modalities that you have already practiced in that animal's body that are going to help in a certain way, and have practiced some of those de-escalation techniques. That's so much of a more beautiful, lovely, elegant situation than trying to respond to the moment when no one knows what's happening, everyone's panicked, and there aren't a lot of good scenarios. I mean, those are scenarios where pharmaceuticals are probably necessary, but there's a lot more that we can do. And for that long-term behavioral health, I think much more impactful.
So, I mean it perfectly. I don't mean to, but it's very easy to go, it's almost like we should be prepared the way we do for like disasters and emergencies. We should be prepared for these stressors in their life.
Absolutely.
There's something that I've been really thinking about just for people and pets is like, stress is related to virtually every disease.
Yeah. So true.
So, but we discount it and we don't think of it the same way we look at emergencies or disasters, but we should, because it's a active volcano, Yes. I think it's really scary to think about. And when it's very minor, but over long periods, I think that can have some really damaging effects. Can you speak on that at all? Like, have you had any experience where you've like seen stress early on really wasn't managed well, and then kind of what that can kind of lead to, or issues with that if they don't kind of address this holistic way?
Yes, absolutely. Let me give a couple of examples that I think will fit really well in everyone's brain first, just because they're easy to chat about. Heart disease and seizures are two that I see this commonly in. From a seizure perspective, we can have a true seizure condition where that brain is essentially spasming and that signal is not regulated. But we see anxiety and stress be quite close to that in terms of what's happening at that neuronal level within that neuron. And so while they're not the same, if we also have an underlying seizure disorder and we add on top of it an imbalanced internal environment and a dysregulated external environment, that nervous system is not healthy enough, it's not balanced enough to actually figure it out. So you essentially have a seesaw that's poorly balanced. I don't know what a good analogy for that is. And then you're just like putting in the middle of a storm, and it's not surprising that the animal has a seizure after the groomer appointment, after the vet appointment, close to that barometric pressure change, adjacent to the fireworks, or even the day or two after a stressor. Because again, as we've talked about before, these are building up in the body. So there's a lot that we need to think about of how these conditions can overlay. So if we have a known condition in the body, seizures being an example, but it can also be GI disease or Cushing's, or it doesn't matter, that the internal environment is not balanced and regulated, it's easier to push off balance. So seizures is a really great one to think about. Cardiac disease. So cardiac disease can be a thing in and of itself. It can be congenital, it can be acquired. There's lots of different reasons for it. But essentially it's the heart with your heart rate and your blood pressure. And what happens when you're stressed? Your heart rate goes up, your blood pressure goes up. So even if, again, those conditions are not necessarily exactly interacting, the body systems are. And so it's impossible to think about one without the other. So in an animal that has cardiac disease, that's an interesting one because we actually are really careful with cannabis in cardiac disease. Yeah. We also need to be really careful with that animal's stress level. And so we might use cannabis to reduce the stress level or use massage to reduce the stress level so that that cardiac disease doesn't keep getting challenged. So that heart actually doesn't have as much to work through. So those are really interesting ones that I definitely see get progressively worse if we don't consider behavioral health. Any comments on those? And then I have one more that I'd love to add.
I just think with those two, those lead to even tougher things and more expensive bills and very like extreme measures that have to be taken. I've experienced some of those. They cost a lot and they force tough decisions that I don't wish on anybody. So yeah, I think it's really important to call those out. So yeah, that's all I had.
Yeah. The next one ties into all of those, but I think it's one that may not be on everyone's mind immediately, but it is on every practitioner's mind all the time. What does a stressful event do to that animal's ability to be handled? And then our ability to give appropriate and adequate and timely medical care. So again, the stressed animal is not the animal that you want to be doing radiographs on or be drawing blood on. But if we're in a situation where we need that and we really need to know, we're going to have to push past some of these anxieties and behaviors and put more stress on that body. So if we can handle that stress early on, work in cooperative care training, work in therapeutic touch training, utilize things like cannabis, diet, so that that body is resilient. And we're really intentional about going slow, moving at the animal's pace, not reaching, but asking for touch. Just some of those really, really easy things to do mean that we maintain the animal's trust and the animal continues to consent to its own care over its lifetime. Because unfortunately, what is true and happens not infrequently is that because that animal's behavioral health continues to decline and they refuse so strongly even to biting or just refusing to get into a clinic or to be handled, at the end of that is a really tough decision for a pet parent. If that animal ends up in a severe medical condition or an accident, and the animal refuses to be cared for and will not stay in a kennel, will not have an IV in their arm, sometimes pet parents have to make a euthanasia decision. And that is something that it's so hard on the family unit. It's so hard on the veterinary practitioner. It does not need to be the case, but that I think is something that I would bring up to everyone's mind of how important behavioral health is, and going slow and working preventatively and starting early, because these consequences can be really severe and really scarring. And if we don't think about that trajectory, we might end up in a situation that we should definitely avoid.
I think one thing I would add to it is, like, I think through that process, it's a lot that we covered. But it's small steps. And I think being kind to yourself and not feeling the shame, because we often do that as pet parents. I've done it. Anybody who's owned a pet has lost a pet.
Yes.
I mean, if you haven't yet, I will go through it. And I think it's an important part of being a pet lover, is like going through that process. But the shame that we put on ourselves and the things that I could have did this, I did blah, 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 blah. I think it's important to be kind to ourselves through these processes, even if it is at a level that you're not proud of. It's like, be kind to yourself and take small steps.
Absolutely.
Going on extra walks or whatever the modality that we're starting with, but like start somewhere. And I think also, like, working on ourselves is always a good thing too, but
it's always part of the fun.
but again, same goes for us. It's like, we have to take small steps, and we can't expect to fix it all overnight. And so, you know, I kind of bring it back to these acute situations like fireworks, where it's just like, every year I forget, you know, that the fireworks are going to go off, and then I'm freaking, you know, like, that's the typical story I hear from pet parents. And then they're like, oh, they were so bad this year. Oh, they never had stress with the fireworks, and this year just something clicked. These are all common things I hear. And my thought is, like, this process leading up to it, and knowing that 4th of July is not going anywhere. More pets run away during that time than any time of year. All these data points. Any thoughts on, like, leading up to the summer months and knowing that it's coming, even though they might not have that severe stress, or they do, and we sometimes think, you know, a couple of days before, I'll start giving them CBD.
Yeah. I hear all those phrases as well. And I empathize with the families that are going through that, the pet parents that have many other things on their plate that they're managing. So I echo and empathize with your phrase of be kind to yourself, to your pet, and that bond in between. I think I would add that I frequently hear that emotional exhaustion component as what kind of makes that hard to tackle. So the client saying that feels too big to even begin. You know, I haven't done anything since last year. Last year was horrible, but I haven't done anything because it just feels too, like, it's how to take that first step. And so your point about making it very small and actionable is really important. And I have found a lot of success in reframing what we're trying to do. That instead of working towards managing this really stressful situation and trying to not let the panic attack happen, what if instead we work towards a beautiful evening reading a book with the rain outside with your animal cuddled next to you? Like, and just putting the perspective on what that could be, so that I think that lets those smaller steps be taken easier, because that means that on a non-stormy night, you sit and read a book with your animal. And then on a kind of stormy night, you also sit and read a book with your animal. So that, to me, I think is a better way for us to approach these big problems, by really breaking them up, but putting a perspective on them that focuses on the bond and the everyday, rather than just this big, momentous, really scary, hard to tackle thing. Because in an animal's and our nervous systems and bodies, you have to respect that it takes time to build those circuits. Those neurons have to grow, that body has to change. And so there is an element of just doing it 5-10 minutes that really can make a big difference down the road.
You said something that sparked my nerd brain, the nervous system. I've taken a lot of guidance from you and many other vets that use cannabis. I think the nervous system is really important. Yes. In terms of their resiliency of calming, these situations. Can you, I guess just my selfish nerd brain wants to hear kind of your thoughts on, like, when you look at the nervous system, whether it's cannabis use or, therapeutic touch, as you said, how important is the nervous system in calming that? And like, just from a pet owner standpoint, like understanding that is very important when it comes to these stressful situations.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so much research right now in human mental health, behavioral health, emotional health, all of that. And that focuses on the nervous system and how the nervous system interfaces with the body. So the fact that we can't tear our nervous system and our nerves away from the organs and muscles and things that it innervates, but looking at it as that truly holistic system allows us to figure out which part do we need to tweak. And the nervous system, because it is that master control system, whether it's from the brain and the central nervous system all the way down to the nerves that are in our periphery or nerves that are in our GI tract, it is this amazing highway of information and communication of that internal and external environment. And so it really is the one that is sending information to all the other systems about whether they should panic or not panic or what's about to happen. And so if we can get the nervous system in line, we have a much easier time at directing all of these other systems like the GI tract or the heart rate or any of these other pieces by focusing on nervous system. And when we think about cannabis, we really think about the immune system as well. So nervous system and immune system. The nervous system gives us the ability to teach the animal resiliency because it is that organ that's really instructing all of the other cells about what they should be doing. So if we can get that one online, often we have a lot of success.
Yeah, I think it's such a kind of overlooked thing. We don't think about it. It's one of the many things that with our pets, we think they just they're so efficient and they manage their health so well. Mm-hmm. Most pets that are not living completely sedentary are relatively fit and, resilient just naturally. But I think, again, back to what I originally said is like, they're so good at like hiding emotion too, unless we're truly in tune with like understanding what is actually going on a day-to-day basis. And then the triggers that we so often avoid. My dog doesn't like this thing, so I'd never do that thing. Or I can never do anything because my dog doesn't like the things that I do. So I think it's important to kind of, assess that and also like improve those responses with diet, exercise, and even supplements sometimes.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts on like the sound therapy or kind of in the moment of like any kind of tools in regards to, I've heard some really cool stuff from other vets on sound therapy or even like playing certain kinds of music or anything. I know there's a lot of research on that for people too.
Yeah. Again, I think we're at the nervous system. Still the nervous system is the key here. And if we have chosen to regulate that nervous system to a sound, that sound is going to be really, or, a set of music, etc., a piece, that nervous system is going to be really good at knowing what it's supposed to do when it hears that sound. And I think that that's an important way to think about these modalities in association with the nervous system. There is a learning component. So you could just play a set of sounds that have been studied and are probably calming to animals, and absolutely sound and that frequency and vibration absolutely affects the body and absolutely can affect the nervous system.
Yeah.
How much more if that nervous system has heard that set of sounds before and it has been linked to a calm, settled state, right? This is any meditation app that you might do as a human or any sound that we're cued to, our phone going off, we're like, what happened? So it's just our nervous system responding. So I think that, again, thinking about that training it for an action gives us a lot more power in that moment. That yes, we can make some progress with sounds in a stressful situation, but even better if that nervous system knows what it's supposed to do.
Yeah, I mean, that's right on the money. And I think that's so helpful. Dr. Casara, I always learn a ton from you. We're right at like a little bit over an hour. We can talk all day, you know that. But I wanted to keep this somewhat digestible within an hour. My suggestions leading up to these hectic months with thunderstorms and fireworks is to start implementing some of these practices. Obviously, we'd love for you to start incorporating CBD or a cannabis product from us, but also incorporating, you know, whether it's, you know, exercise or creating healthy routines that are a little bit more relaxing before the events. All these things can really help, but don't feel like you have to do them overnight. You don't have to change the diet and move them to, you know, the mountains and start meditating overnight. You know, be kind to yourself and be nice. But anything else that you can add would be really helpful.
Yeah, let me just briefly touch on which molecules are really useful for this type of scenario. And, you know, anyone who has interfaced with our company, Veterinary Cannabis, knows that we work really hard to be product neutral. So we always speak from a molecule perspective and then speak about how you can assess whether that product that you want to work with has those molecules, one, has enough of those molecules, two, and is lacking the heavy metals and pesticides and blah, 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 so that we're actually putting in the things that we want. So one, Sean, you know that I've always been impressed by your company's dedication to testing, even when it's not required or no one forces you to, just from a pet parent perspective. I think that comes really clearly through what your company produces. You understand the importance of having a clean product and making sure that your clients can see that for themselves. And I'll say from the veterinarian's perspective, the ability to look at a lab test makes me really happy. While I trust you, I would really like to see that written on a piece of paper. And I think that that's really important for pet parents to internalize and require of their brands, that whoever you're voting for financially, wherever you're going to put that, you know, physical demonstration of trust, you want something back from it. You want to be able to say, I'm giving you this money because I know what I'm getting in return. So whichever company you're working with, whichever sort of formulation might work best for your animal, and there's lots of help for that if you're not sure or you need more guidance there. Let me just say that for what we've chatted about today, the CBD molecule, cannabidiol, is really the molecule that we would reach for in these circumstances. The CBD molecule, it does many actions that are very fascinating, but really important in keeping the body's own endocannabinoids around. So the molecules that I'm making right now, that your dog's making, your cat's making, that are essential for them balancing their lives, they can literally be used up. So you can have a normal, appropriate supply of endocannabinoids and then be in a really stressful situation, particularly if it's over multiple hours or multiple days. So again, why we think about summer storms, evacuations, fireworks even, you can literally use up the molecules that you need to be able to de-escalate. And so again, from journaling perspective, if we see these trends that are happening over multiple days, we could just identify that the animal's wearing out their balancing system. And definitely if the summer storms are happening every day, it's going to get worse and worse and worse because those resources to balance are being depleted. So the CBD molecule is really powerful at preventing the destruction or slowing down the destruction of these endocannabinoids. So that doesn't mean they're making more or that we're artificially putting something else in that should be there. We're just keeping them around longer. And that's a really lovely way to support what the body's already trying to do without tipping it over into any too much sedation or not. And again, because your pet parents are journaling, right? We know that they're definitely doing that one. We can really see when that body wears out. So then we might know that we need to add in some other molecules or change our dosing or change our timing. But using a CBD dominant product to start with can be really impactful. Again, for me, I'm being kind of selfish here, to see what's going on. Is this animal's ECS tone appropriate? How quickly is it recovering? Does it need just a little bit of support? Maybe we just need some massage, and that can upregulate the ECS. Or maybe we actually do need some molecules that support that. Maybe we need some THC to be able to really keep that robust. So the CBD molecule is probably the one that I would encourage everyone to think about in the circumstances we talked about here. It is also a really good anxiolytic. The CBD molecule binds to quite a few other receptors in the body in a very lovely, supportive, not put too much sedation onto the animal way. I will say if you give enough of it, your animal will be sedate. So there is definitely a level that you can get that sedative effect. And sometimes we want that for a car ride or a toenail trim, but working with the product over a period of time, journaling, and then, you know, asking if you need some additional help. So CBD dominant product really is kind of the set of molecules you're looking for here. I'll also add in that CBG, which I know that you make a line that also has CBG in it, is a really lovely molecule to think about in these body tight, scared scenarios. So the CBG molecule is a GABA inhibitor, which means that it's going to keep GABA, which is the molecule that helps our body just rest and relax and kind of keeps us toned down. It's going to keep those molecules around longer as well. So we, especially when pairing those together, can see a lovely relaxation of the body and of the central nervous system. And that's really the dual pairing that you want if that animal needs to learn through the scenario and learn that they're okay. I love incorporating CBG if I'm doing massage because it really helps that body relax. So CBD dominant kind of as a starter point for everybody, and then CBG as a molecule maybe to add in down the road.
And you said GABA inhibitor, right?
Yeah. So, or sorry, a GABA reuptake inhibitor.
Reuptake. Okay.
Yeah. So it's going to keep those molecules around longer.
Yeah, I get those mixed up sometimes, and that could be mistaken easily.
Well, I said it wrong to begin with.
Yeah. Well, yeah, there's like those prefacing words that you like have to address, and that makes a big difference. But it's so important to note that I love that you call the ECS tone. I love that you called that out. I think it's so important to think about that as like, that is kind of like their entire state of being.
Yes.
And then also there's not a one size fits all, and there needs to be kind of some trial and error and experimentation, or seeing, you know, dosage wise what works. I talk a lot about even just the way they metabolize things. If they're super overweight, they probably metabolize a little bit slower, or if they're underweight, they might, you know, they might metabolize things much faster. So I think all these things factor in, but I think at the end of the day, it's understanding that, you know, going slow, and with all of these methods and modalities that we've kind of laid out, I think it's important to, you know, give yourself patience and that space to, you know, help your pet, but also, you know, work on yourself too through the process. And I think it's a good practice for both us and our pets. That's why I love them, because they help us kind of work on that stuff too. And it probably highlights a lot of it too, a lot of times. And you're like, all right, I got to do the thing for myself too. So,
I mean, that's what's amazing about animals in general, but also the humans that love them, that many times they are the ones that get us activated. They're the ones that make us take that step. And from a One Health perspective, looking at how all of that interacts and integrates, we can't consider our own health separate from the animals that occupy our space, or vice versa. We can't consider their health without thinking about our own. And sometimes that's hard because we do care for them so much, but many times we can use that to say, all right, I am willing to take one step each day to get there.
There's a really great quote. I can't remember, but I'll put it in some of the clips I'll put on here from this. Dr. Casara, thank you so much. We just did another 15 minutes effortlessly after I was trying to wrap it up because we could just do that all day.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Where can everyone find you, and how would, like, if somebody wanted to reach out to you, ask questions? I know you don't want to get overwhelmed, but, you know, what's the best way to reach out and find people that are kind of in the same path in education and helping pets kind of go through this process? and at least getting some guidance on cannabis use, whether, you know, it's cannabis or stress management, those kind of things.
Yeah, for general cannabis questions, our website, veterinarycannabis.org, is a great place to start. Really, I would think about reaching out to us there if you need that extra tier of guidance. So you have an animal with a concurrent condition that also has heart disease, also has seizures, and you want to use cannabis, or you're not seeing the success that you want to, or there's a question underlying that you just need that extra level of counseling. So that's kind of where I would direct people if they need that extra level of support. But Sean, for your local Colorado audience, I would say, particularly anyone who's interested in summer storms, disaster preparedness, we're working closely with you through our disaster response team to make sure that we're out in the community actually prepping pets for evacuation. So that means talking about, is your animal stressed? Do you need to have cannabis in your go bag? What is your pet's evacuation bag look like? What do you actually need to support them in those environments? So for, again, your Colorado audience, probably finding us at one of your clinics or shows this summer is a great way to have like some one-on-one time with, for sure, me, the One Health veterinarians, public health veterinarians that are out. So if you have questions that you need help with immediately as we kind of come into summer, maybe coming out and finding us at one of those events might be a really good way to intersect. Yeah.
And Stay Animal Rescue is another great group. And, you know, some of the organizations that we're going to be working with through the summer, you know, we have the Urban Dog Broomfield Farmers Market.
Yay, so excited for that.
In addition to that, we also have our Pet Emergency Preparedness Guide. It's very basic stuff. People could just fill out their pet's ID. All the stuff we talked about, they can download and write, you know, what's my pet's behavior? What do they like, not like? This is all cool stuff that you can literally stick in a bag that Dr. Casara is talking about. It's just really basic info, vet info, you know, all these little things, vaccination, microchipping, those kind of things. Very important stuff, but all you got to do is write it down and have it in something. So if somebody has to go grab your pet, it's really important. So we have a guide to download that. And then we're going to be working on kind of this stress resiliency guide. And hopefully have that out very soon. So by the time this comes out, hopefully it'll be ready, and we'll be promoting the heck out of it and getting people and their pets nice and chill for these summer months. So
yeah, I love it. Sean, are you going to have that guide available at the June clinic? Because we'll be reading microchips, like checking numbers, can write in, can help the pet parent write in any of that information, and importantly, that picture of, you know, demonstrating ownership of pet is a great thing to have in that guide. So again, if anyone wants to come out and find us at one of the events, we can help kind of make sure that you have the right information on that form and you're ready in case someone else needs to come rescue your pet.
I'll have it at least I'll have like something that they can download at the event.
Perfect. Yeah.
And it's just a PDF. So I think for the stress management one, I might have like a framework and at least have like a starting point. But I think I got a lot of work to put into it. I think there's a lot to cover, but I also want to make it easy for pet parents to understand and go, you know, just take steps.
Absolutely.
You know, that's been the running theme. So awesome. Thank you, everyone. Hopefully you guys got a lot out of this, and hopefully we'll keep our pets nice and chill this summer, and you know, be kind to yourself and be kind to your pets. All right. Thank you, guys.